Greetings, tree huggers. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Skokol gravel bed. As you're aware, we've been conducting research on how trees perform in gravel beds since 2006, but this past year, 2019, we decided to try out something. If you go through the literature and you read some of the articles about gravel beds, a number of them mention that they add nutrients, add fertilizers. Sometimes it's a one-time addition of a slow-release fertilizer. Sometimes it's a one-time addition of a slow release, followed maybe a month later by a fast release. Sometimes it's every 4 days when they irrigate. They irrigate with a liquid fertilizer. The question that we had on this is, why weren't there any controls? They were basically treating all the trees in the gravel beds to these nutrient additions. So that's, probably, a reasonable thing to try if you're using a gravel bed as a production bed. But we don't advocate, gravel as a production bed. We advocate gravel as a healing in bed. So given that, the question that came up was, if we do add nutrients, how's it going to impact trees? Is it going to make them greener? Is it going to put on caliper faster? Maybe the root system will get better. Maybe they'll transplant easier. Maybe they'll survive better. So those are kind of our questions when we went into this. So in 2019, we have this gravel bed here at Skokol. We had about 105 trees in here, 21 different varieties, ranging from, down redwood to willows to redbuds, just kind of all over the board of things that we'd worked with in the past, for instance, the oaks, and some of them we had never worked with before, for instance, the dawn redwoods. And we decided that we would treat some of these, it was a random sampling of some of these, and we would treat them with a slow release fertilizer. Specifically, we went with Osmocote. That was a complete fertilizer plus micronutrients, and it has a 6-month release. Now the challenge was setting it up in a bed, as you can see here, where they're fairly close to each other, of trying to add the nutrients to one tree without it impacting the other tree. So what I was counting on is when irrigation or when it rains or any instance when water hits there, in gravel, pretty much goes straight down. It's all gravitational. It doesn't really move horizontally. So I really did count on that. And when we applied the fertilizers, we basically scooped out the gravel at about a 8 to 9 inch radius around the trunks of the tree, a couple inches down, put in the amount. And in this case, we used, I have to go back to my notes, last year on this one we used 50 cc's of the Osmocote per tree. And again, as I mentioned, they're randomly placed around here, and hopefully that gave us an idea if it was impacting one tree without impacting the other trees. These were installed in May, and we harvested them in September, late September and October, planted them out. Before we planted them out, though, we graded the root system. And over the years, we've come up with, 4 or 5 different ways of grading root systems, ranging from literally counting the number of roots and measuring the lengths of the number of roots. We use a water displacement method, which is probably one of the most accurate methods, where you measure the displaced water when you put the root system into a bin, and that gives you a volume. All these things are well and good for researchers, but we try to convert everything for normal people. So these are community gravel beds. They're not production gravel beds. They're not research gravel beds. And so if I'm trying to help you as a community figure out which of these trees are performing better and if any of them respond to the nutrient additions, there's got to be a fast, simple way of doing this and one that's easy to duplicate. So a few years ago, one of our graduate students, Andrea Derrick, came up with this idea of basically holding the root system up against maybe a light colored board and just, gauging the density of the roots by how much of the background you could actually see through the roots. And so that's really what we've kind of switched to, because we found it's real easy to teach people how to do that. We only have 5 rates. One is basically you can see a lot of white behind it, and 5 is essentially you can't see any white. All you're seeing are roots. So this is the board that we use. We just hold the root system up against this. We have 2 or 3 people looking at it and grading it from 1 to 5. So that's kind of the process, how we fertilize, how we staged out the fertilizers within here randomly. And then when we harvested at the end of the year, did we find anything? And then subsequent, when they were planted out, and then we looked at them in June of this year to look at survival and performance, was there anything? So here's what we found. When we looked at the trees visually, you really couldn't tell. Quite honestly, they all look pretty much the same. There's differences among species. You know, the oaks just don't perform real well in gravel, whereas redbuds, they were born to be in gravel. So within a species, there really wasn't anything recognizable. So no big deal. We looked at caliper. Stem caliper, it really wasn't a big deal on that either. Nothing that we could say, oh yes, this significantly changed it. After plant out, we looked at survival rates. Did that have something to do with it? Not really. So pretty much if they were going to put out good roots, they were going to put out good roots, and they survived. And then subsequent to that, when we looked at them in June, did they still look pretty good? Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of change. Not a whole lot of change there. So from those perspectives, we really couldn't see a whole lot. But keeping in mind that they were planted in September, October, and the last time they were kind of assessed was in June, not a whole long time really to look at. Are they going to become established? How are they going to look at the end of the summer? The one thing that we did find though was root density. And out of 21 species, we had 13 of them that actually increased the root density by 1 grade. So for instance, if they were a 3 with the addition of the nutrients, those came out as 4s. Or if all of them that had no nutrients within that species were 4s, the ones with nutrients came out as 5. So, you know, that was encouraging that we had that many. Of those that we considered did increase root density, all but 2 of them we considered it significant. They bumped up at least 1 point, in some cases almost 2 points. So for instance, from a 3 on average for the non-fertilized to a 5 for the fertilized ones. So when you look at this this video, there's going to be some still shots, and the still shots will kind of show you how we grade these and what the difference. I think I have some oaks and some hackberries in that, and it'll give you an idea of what a number 1 looks like, number 3, number 5, etc., 4 or 5. It's real easy to grade these 1 and 5, the best and the worst. And it's actually pretty easy to grade them as number 3s too, right in the middle. It can get a little, it takes a little bit of practice to do a good job on grading 2 and 4. So kind of put that in perspective. But I did want to point out some of the species that really did respond well to this. And in particular, heritage birch was one of them that was it was significantly greater than the others. Ginkgos, plane trees, especially exclamation, Ohio buckeye, serviceberry, redbuds, yellowwood, again was one of those that significantly increased. Honey locust, we use northern acclaim on this one. Coffee trees, male coffee trees, blue beech, carpinus, just spectacular root system. That was one of them that went from an average of 3.5 with no nutrients to 5 right across the board with nutrients. And then golden curls willow. quite honestly, I don't know why anybody would fertilize willow roots because they just grow like crazy anyway. But with golden curls, which is kind of one of those curlicue willows, there was a significant increase. So all of this will be written up in the green reports for 2019, 2020. You'll get much more detailed information on that. But this is just a little bit of a review of what went on with the nutrient study. So in the end, you have to look at things and say, what should you take from the study? Well, it's one study, so put that in perspective. I don't know about you all, but I never trust one study. I'd like to see, numerous ones coming up with about the same information. The problem is, and I think I did a pretty good job of looking through the literature, I couldn't find any other experiments that did look at controls plus treated and engage these different things like survival, canopy increase, color, et cetera, for a community gravel bed. They may have done it years ago for production beds, but for a community gravel bed, I just don't think they're in there long enough for it. However, there was really good root response. So what it's inspired me to do is this year set up the very same study. We have different trees now this year. Some of them are the same, but we have some new ones in here too. And this time, instead of the slow release, 6-month slow release, I'm using a 10-10-10 fast release. And when I applied it, I made sure that after the trees were installed, and because it's normal to have 1 or 2 trees die or look pretty puny, I kind of let those parse out, so I didn't treat ones that were unhealthy or that were going to die. And same protocol, random, within 8 to 9 inches of radius around the trunk, dig down a couple inches, apply the fertilizer, and in this case I used 10-10-10 at the equivalent rate of 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, which sounds like an awful lot of nitrogen if you're growing grass. If you're producing trees, it's not. That's a pretty common rate for tree production. And at the end of this season, when we start harvesting the trees again in September, maybe early October, we'll go through the same thing again. We'll grade the root system as well as caliper increase, et cetera. And maybe there will be a difference with a nutrient addition that, 10-10-10, basically it's pretty much gone within 6 weeks. Whereas the Osmocote parses it out very slowly over 6 months. So perhaps the difference in the release rate of the fertilizers is going to have some difference. Right now, all I can tell you from the information that we got from the first part of the study was, it's kind of interesting to see the root system increase. So that's all we have to say. Coming to you live from, live today from the Skokol gravel bed. If you're ever on campus, stop by Green Hall and Skokol and you'll see the gravel bed. It's right by the water tower, and you get an idea of the research that we're conducting right up here on campus. Thanks for joining us.